All right, 1 Samuel chapter 28, the medium of Endor. Now you'll have to remember back a couple of weeks ago before I went on vacation where we were at, and you might remember that I gave you a rundown of the last 4 chapters in 1 Samuel, basically what we're going to be looking at. And so 1 Samuel chapter 28, there is a gathering for a battle, and it's really going to be something. This is Saul leading the Israelites against the Philistine army, and they are in the gathering process. The Philistines are going to be at a place called Shunem, and the Israelites will be at a place called Gilboa. Now, I provided you a map on the back of your handout, and I know the print is small. It needs to be for the space that I have to work with. I'm sorry about that, but if you will look just down below Lake Galilee, you're going to find, it's a northern part of that map, you'll be able to spot Shunem. And very close to that, just below that, you're going to find Gilboa. There's a little plus sign there. That plus sign indicates it's a mountain. So Mount Gilboa. And then to the north of that is Shunem. These are the gathering places of the two opposing forces, Israelites, Philistines. Saul takes a look at the enemy and he begins to tremble, and he seeks the guidance of God. Verse 6. But God is silent. God doesn't speak to Saul. He doesn't reveal anything to him. He's not hearing his prayer. That's because of sin in Saul's life. So here's Saul trembling. Now you come down to chapter 29. And that chapter is going to be describing the journey of the Philistines. Remember, the Philistines have their 5 main cities toward the south in Canaan land. And you'll be able to find down in that southern part, you'll be able to see Gath. That's their chief city. And down below that is Ziklag. That's where David and his men have been. So down around Gath and Ziklag, that's where the Philistines are coming from. And they're going to be traveling northward, and they're going along that coastal plain alongside the Mediterranean Sea, heading up toward Shunem. And David is going with them. David and his 600 men, his 600-man army, he's going with them. But the Philistine commanders speak to Achish, their king, and they say, no way, we're not having him go along with us. He's one of the Israelite people. He's a champion of theirs. And we don't trust him. I don't care how long he's been serving you. We don't trust him. We don't want him there. It's going to go bad. So you send him back to Ziklag. All right, we come to chapter 30. David and his men are back at Ziklag. They're sent away from that battlefield. They can't finish the journey up to Shunem. So they're sent back to Ziklag. And when they arrive back at Ziklag, there's nobody there. Their wives and their children have been taken. The place has been looted by an enemy. And David's men are about to turn on David. I mean, they are distraught over this. Now you get to chapter 31, and you are back at the battle. Shunem, Gilboa, Israelites, Philistines. You are back at the battle. And you're going to see the result of that, the outcome of that battle in chapter 31. And that's where Saul and his sons, including Jonathan, are going to be killed. So this lesson is concerning the events of chapter 28. And that's where we left off. Now Saul is not answered by God, and he's looking for information. God won't talk to him, so he's looking for information from Samuel. What's the problem with that? He's dead. How do you talk to a dead man? So he's looking for information from Samuel from beyond the grave. And he's going to be consulting, lesson title, The Medium of Endor. And he's going to use this medium of Endor to try to raise Samuel up from the dead in spirit form to be able to talk to him, communicate with him, get answers that God won't give to him. You can already see a lot of problems with that. So we have some sections of study, 4 of them. And here's the way we're going to approach chapter 28, first 7 verses. The developing problem. That's the gathering of the armies. God won't answer Saul. Then you end up in verses 8 through 14, section number 2 of our study. Saul in conflict with himself. Then section number 3, verses 15 through 19, if the dead could speak. And out of all the sections, that one sort of gathers my interest. If the dead could speak, well, what would they say? And then we come to the last section, section number 4, verses 20 through 25, Saul's meal of despair. And that will be an interesting finish to the chapter. So we want to give our attention to the first 7 verses. Now it came about in those days that the Philistines gathered their armed camps for war, to fight against Israel. And Achish said to David, know assuredly that you'll go out with me in the camp, you and your men. David said to Achish, very well, you shall know what your servant can do. So Achish said to David, very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had removed from the land those who were mediums and spiritists. So the Philistines gathered together and came and camped in Shunem. Saul gathered all Israel together, and they camped in Gilboa. When Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. When Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him either by dreams, or by Urim, or by prophets. Then Saul said to his servant, seek for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there's a woman who is a medium at Endor. It's interesting to see Saul's reaction. God won't answer him not by dreams, not by Urim, not by prophets. So his response is, let's go find a medium. Let's go find somebody who can talk to the dead. What should his answer have been? What should have his response been? We need to know the answer to this. The answer is, why won't God answer me? And how do I fix it? That should have been the response. That was not his response. He went deeper the other way. And so this is the king that's removed from the throne, and David is going to take his place. So there's an awkward relationship that we run into in the first few verses here between David and the Philistine king Achish. And that awkward relationship is that they are enemies. And David has gone there to preserve his life. He's running from Saul. And Saul won't go into the stronghold of the Philistines. So David's hanging out with the enemy. And he has persuaded Achish to trust him. That David has persuaded him, I'm on your side. I'm serving your interest. I'm attacking your enemies. I'm doing your bidding. You can trust me. But that's not who David really is. So David's being very deceitful. Achish is trusting him, but the commanders under Achish are not trusting David. So you have this real awkward thing. And as they're heading to this battle, heading northward up to Shunem, what position does Achish give to David? Bodyguard for life, to preserve the king's life. And he said, you know, I trust you. You're going with me. And if you look at just up a chapter to chapter 29 and verse 2, I want you to notice where David is as they're in this caravan heading northward to Shunem for the battle. The lords of the Philistines were proceeding on by hundreds and by thousands. And David and his men were proceeding on in the rear with Achish. David, you have the army of the Philistines traveling northward, and on the back end of that is David, his 600-man army, and King Achish, and they're in the back. And so what would you expect David to do as the battle begins? What would you expect David to do? Is David going to kill his fellow Israelites? Never. That means he would have to turn on the Philistines. And he's in the back of the pack with the king. And all of a sudden you're going to have Israelite army in the front and David and his men in the back, and that's a catastrophe waiting to happen for the Philistines. And so that's why the commanders say, nope, he can't go with us. No way. Got to send him back to Ziklag. And so they're going to do that. David implies to Achish that he's going to serve his purposes. But that is what I would call chicanery. This is deceitful. I want you to look at this sort of vague response David gives in verse 2. Very well, you shall know what your servant can do. What does that mean? What does that mean? You don't know what that means. You have to make an assumption. So Achish is assuming that means, I'm going to find out about these valiant soldiers. I'm going to find out about this cream of the crop of the army of the Israelites that's now fighting for me. And I'm going to see them attack their own people, and they're going to be key in this battle for me. Very well. You're going to know what your servant can do. But what that means to David is, very well, you'll see what we can do, and we're going to do it to you. That's what he means. There's some duplicity there. Is that the way Christians are supposed to be? Are we supposed to give vague statements? Are we supposed to give things that it could mean this, it could mean that, and you don't know what it means, but I'm going to imply what it means, and I'm going to be deceitful, and you're going to have to figure it out on your own? Are we supposed to be like that? We are not. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. If it's anything more than that, that's of evil. You read about that when you get into the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. We're not supposed to be that way. We shouldn't be making those kinds of statements. That shouldn't be our dialogue in life, where we're deceitful, fooling somebody, giving an innuendo of one thing but meaning something else. We should not be that way. We need to be up front with stuff. All right, there are two other ingredients that help describe Saul's difficult situation in verse 3. One, Samuel, his spiritual counselor, is dead. Number two, Saul has removed all the mediums and spiritists from the land. I want you to just give some attention to these two or three passages dealing with this kind of individual in the land. Leviticus 19, verse 31. Do not turn to mediums or spiritists. Do not seek them out to be defiled by them. I'm the Lord your God. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 6. As for the person who turns to mediums and to spiritists to play the harlot after them, I will also set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people. Leviticus 20, verse 27. Now a man or a woman who is a medium or a spiritist shall surely be put to death. Is that what Saul did? He did not. He didn't put them to death. He removed them from the land, but he didn't even do that. So they are to be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their blood guiltiness is upon them. So here's what Saul did. I'm going to remove them from the land, but everybody knows where one is. I'm going to remove them from the land, but I'm going to keep one in arm's reach. How does sin happen in our lives? I'm going to repent of sin. I'm going to remove it from my life, but I'm going to keep it in arm's reach. It's still going to be available. I'm going to keep it in arm's reach. I'm not really going to get rid of it. Put the old man of sin to death. Romans chapter 6. Put that old man of sin to death. I'm going to remove it from the land, but I'm not going to put it to death. I'm going to keep it in arm's reach. I know where it's at. I'm not there right now. I'm not planning on going there, but there it is, just in case. How does sin happen in our lives? Very often, that's part of the process of how it happens. Deuteronomy 18, verses 10 and 11. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. No way. Thought it was funny looking at this lesson, and I'm scrolling down through Facebook, and you know they put all those ads in there. You know what they had in there? A crystal ball. A crystal ball, and they used the word divination in promoting it. It's still around. Now, a lot of that is a crystal ball sort of mesmerizing. It's just a big marble. But it captures our attention just because of how it's made and its shape, and it's just fun to look at. It's just, you know, it's just a knick-knack for a lot of people. No big deal. But not for everybody. Some people still believe in that stuff. And they hold some value in it. I don't know about you. I don't know how you were brought up. You know one thing that never came into our home? And I've heard stories about other Christian homes. It just, no, you can't. A Ouija board. No, you don't. That doesn't belong in our house. Not even as a piece of entertainment. No. It is something that goes a wrong direction. And we don't want to play that. And so that's, that was something that I remember growing up, and maybe you remember something similar to that. Well, the Bible was pretty plain about this stuff, and Saul was just going in so much deeper by trying this. He had, this is something I do think is he's so turned around. What did he do at Nob? What did he do at the city of Nob? What do you remember? He killed 85 priests. Remember that? The city of Nob, where all the priesthood was? He killed 85 priests. He didn't kill the mediums. He removed them from the land. And he kept one hidden. And everybody knew that she was there. But he killed the priests of the living God. That's how turned around he is. And the only one who escaped from that, by the way, was Abiathar, and he went to David. And so God has not only cut off Saul from his divine blessing, but Saul has cut himself off from God by removing a legitimate priesthood and then doing something that God said, if you do that, you're cut off. So God's cut him off because of his sin. Saul's cut himself off because of his sin. And he's continuing to follow that same pathway in seeking out this medium of Endor. Sometimes you think that if you just keep digging, you're going to get out of it. And you're not. You just go in deeper. So Saul may be approaching God. He's looking for a dream. He's looking for an answer from the Urim. He's asking for an answer from a prophet. I'm not even sure he has access to all of that. But he is trying to approach God, and he's doing it with error. When Saul sees the posturing of this enemy army, and verse 5, he is trembling in his heart. There is a valley between Shunem and Mount Gilboa. Between those two locations, there is a valley there between those slopes, and that valley is called Jezreel. This is a famous battlefield in the Old Testament. And it is a flatland valley. It separates Samaria from Galilee. And this was a major battlefield. You'll see it coming up over and over and over again. When you get all the way to the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, you're going to find a reference to that place in the term Armageddon. That is referring to the valley of Jezreel. There is a mountain in that area called Megiddo. Armageddon. Mountain or hill of Megiddo. Armageddon. That's where that term comes from. And it has to do with that area and with that Old Testament battlefield where the forces of good and evil were continually meeting and battling it out. And when it's used in the book of Revelation, it is used in a figurative way. There is no literal battle when the Bible talks about Armageddon. It is a spiritual, figurative application, the final confrontation between good and evil, the outcome of it all. It is the other side of the Garden of Eden problem and the outcome of that for all eternity. But it is not a literal battle, the way a lot of people make it out to be. If you're going to do battle, and if you're going to be having chariots in particular, that is a prime stage for that kind of battle. And you'll notice the Philistines go to a great amount of trouble to come from the area of Gath all the way to the north to stage that battle from Shunem into the valley of Jezreel. They make it a point to make that the confrontation place. This is like those old westerns that you watch where the gunslinger goes so the sun is at his back and the enemy has to look into the sun. They want to stage the battle at this place because it's a prime location for the kind of war they want to conduct. This keeps them out of guerrilla warfare, where you have the unconventional soldiers hiding in crevices and rocks and caves and behind trees. It keeps them from facing that kind of enemy to something that's out in the open in a flat plain where they can bring their kind of weapons into play and have the greatest advantage. So they make it a point to stage the battle there. 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 6, Saul makes an effort to inquire of the Lord, maybe through legitimate means at first, and God doesn't answer him. And you remember from Isaiah 59, verses 1 and 2, but your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God, and your sins have hidden His face from you so that He does not hear. Every once in a while, a situation will come up where someone who knows they don't have much of a relationship with God at all, they know they've been on the opposite side of God in their life, finding themselves in some desperate situation and coming to their Christian friend and asking them to pray for them. How much better would it be to fix the problem between self and God so that you can pray to God on your own behalf? That's what Saul should have done. That's what we should be doing today as well. Let's go to 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. 1 Chronicles 10, verses 13 and 14. So Saul died for his trespass which he committed against the Lord, because of the word of the Lord which he did not keep, and also because he asked counsel of a medium, making inquiry of it, and did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore he killed him and turned the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse. And you can say, well, he did inquire of the Lord. God didn't answer him. What that text in 1 Chronicles 10 is suggesting is he should have fixed the relationship with God and inquired of the Lord. That's what he should have done. He did not do that. He inquired of this medium. So he died. He died because of his sins. He died because he inquired of a medium. He died because he didn't fix his relationship with God, and the kingdom is handed over to David. That's going to be the same outcome we have. Spiritually, eternally, when we don't fix things with God and we try to go around behind God and fix our life a different kind of way. That's the same kind of outcome that we're going to have if we do that. So Saul inquired, didn't do it right. His sins made it impossible. The Lord wouldn't answer him. He should have repented, should have cooperated with God, but he fought against God's will to the bitter end of his life. Saul's hoping to do an end run around God by contacting deceased Samuel, talking to his spirit from beyond the grave. You might give some thought here to those who advocate praying to Mary, to those that man has proclaimed as saints of some sort. And to know that our world is full of people who have severed their relationship to God, and they're looking for answers to life's problems in all the wrong places. Just give some thought to that. You can't do an end run around God. You can't get to that place a different way. Jesus was very plain. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. No one comes to the Father but through Him. And there's only one right way to do that. All right, you have comments or questions before we begin verse 8? Yes. Were mediums usually women? Is that the reason he called for a woman? I don't know that to be true, and I really don't have any more of an answer for you than that, other than they knew about this one who was a medium. And so that's why he called for a woman, because they knew this was a medium. But I don't know of anything that would say they were always women or usually women. But that this particular one that his people knew about was a woman. And that's why he called for a woman in this case. That's the only answer I've got right now, for whatever that's worth. Why didn't he talk to God? Why didn't Saul do that? He knew who God was. He talked to him before. God had communicated with Saul before. Why didn't he do that? And the answer is, why is there anybody, even today, who doesn't do that? And the answer is, pride gets in the way. I can't humble myself before the Lord that way. I can't admit my error. I can't admit I'm wrong. I can't fall down before Him and worship Him as I should, because pride gets in the way. Ego's there. and I've dug in this deep, and I've got to stand my ground, and if I did that, what would everybody think of me? What kind of king would I be? They'd stop following me. He has all this faulty kind of reasoning going on in his life. He's concerned about his standing in the eyes of the people, and to do that would, be a sign of weakness. Well, it is. We're all weak before the Lord. And Saul was not the kind of man to be able to do that. He refused. So he knew the answer. But so do most people today. They know the answer, but they don't want to admit the answer. They want to turn every other direction. Why don't people come to God today the way that they're supposed to in the Bible? Why do they turn to evolutionary theory? Why do they turn to atheism? Why do they turn to false religion? Because it's an easier road. Demands less of them. And they get to be their own God and do their own thing. And so Saul is stuck in that mode. All right, we are on to verse 8. Then Saul disguised himself by putting on other clothes and went, he and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, I want you to notice this. He disguised himself. He showed up at night. I want you to think about why. There's a reason. I want you to think about why. And he said, conjure up for me, please, and bring up for me whom I shall name to you. But the woman said to him, behold, you know what Saul has done, how he's cut off those who are mediums and spiritists from the land. Why are you then laying a snare for my life to bring about my death? Now that may indicate that Saul has killed some. That may indicate that he has done that. Not just pushed them out of the land, but he's killed some. But there are others that are tucked away and people know about them and he hasn't extinguished them. So why are you laying a snare for my life to bring about my death? Saul vowed to her by the Lord, saying, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. Now this is Saul in conflict with himself. There's a big contradiction going on in verses 8 through 10. Saul, in verse 3, is going to get rid of these mediums from the land, but he keeps one around, and now he's going to one that before he said, you can't live here. Now he's got one tucked away, hidden somewhere, and he goes there. It's Saul in conflict with himself. Now he disguises himself. He goes on a nighttime journey. I want you to pull out that map on the back of your paper. If you hadn't noticed this before, I want you to notice it now. Find Mount Gilboa. That's where the Israelites are camped. When you find Mount Gilboa, just look a tiny bit to the north and see Shunem. That's where the Philistines are. Now look a little further north and notice where Endor is. To get from Gilboa to Endor, you have to pass the Philistine army. Why does he disguise himself and go at night? One, he wants to get past the enemy. Two, he doesn't want the medium to know who he is. There's 2 things going on there. He wants to disguise himself so she doesn't know who he is, but he also has to go at nighttime to get past the enemy forces. So there's a couple things going on with this disguising stuff. And by the way, what do you remember about Saul? What do you remember about his stature? He's taller than everybody else. He's kind of hard to miss. I wonder what that disguise looked like. You think he was humped over? But he'd be kind of hard to hide. And so he's doing that, disguising himself as best he can, but he's hiding from somebody else as well, isn't he? He's hiding from God. All right, the medium is suspecting something in verse 9. She is suspecting this is a sting operation. You're laying a snare for me. This is King Saul's way of trying to figure out if there's any of us still around. And so you're laying a sting operation out for me, and I'm not falling for it. And so that's what she's thinking. And then he tells her in verse 8, verse 11, conjure up, bring up from the dead And this is not a physical form. Where is Samuel buried? What's his hometown? Ramah. And if you look on that map, you'll find Ramah way to the south. He's not trying to bring up his physical body. This is a spiritual form that he's trying to conjure up from the dead. When we die, the body and spirit part company. The body can be buried here, but the soul is in the Hadean realm. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word is Sheol. And he's trying to conjure up the spirit form, that spiritual life of Samuel from the Old Testament realm of Sheol, where the departed spirits of the dead reside. That's what he's endeavoring to do. And then Saul, in verse 10, to set the medium of Endor, to set her mind at ease, what does he do?
He swears to her, no harm will come to you.
He swears to her by the Lord. Does Saul reverence God? No. Does Saul obey God? No. Does the medium of Endor honor and obey God? No. Isn't it interesting that you have these two individuals, one swearing to the other by the Lord, and the other one accepting it as the truth? And neither one of them honor God in their lives. You know anybody like that today? So this is almost humorous to think of this. And the medium feels like this is an honorable and binding oath and safe enough to go forward and try to contact Samuel from the dead. And that is a contradiction going on from every direction. All right, we need to end our study this morning, and we will see what the medium of Endor can do next week. Thank you for your time. We're dismissed.